Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Great. Okay, you're under oath now.
You're going to have to bear with me. There's going to be many moments that are going to be very emotional. I will get stronger as I go through this. Coming in here today and witnessing so many people that were strangers 437 days ago that have now become family is overwhelming, and I thank you. I thank you, the National Citizens Inquiry, for giving our farm and our family a platform to finally have our voices heard and be the voice of our animals. John Graff said something just in one of the preliminary National Citizens Inquiry slides, or setting up to our farmers safe in Canada. And he said, farmers hold their head high, but carry some of the biggest burdens. And this is more true now than ever. At the end of the day, it comes down to two questions. Are farmers safe in Canada? And who protects the people who feed us? I'm going to start with just a glimpse into what brought me to be so involved and compassionate and passionate about fighting for the animals and my family. When I look back over the years, all the memories and all the stories of how the life of ostriches began in our family, I realize, something many people will never fully understand. This wasn't just a farm. What I witnessed was my mom's calling. My grandparents on my dad's side began getting into ostriches. My grandfather, Esper Esperson, was actually the president of Alberta Ostrich Association in the 90s. When my mom was around the ostriches, something in my mom would light up immediately. She fell in love with them right away. That was the beginning of our family's adventure. What followed were decades of dedication, sacrifice, and belief and love. My mom didn't just raise ostriches, she believed in them. She saw in them what many didn't see yet. She saw resilience, she saw strength, she saw hope. She believed that they could do something meaningful for humanity. And that belief has been there for decades, not just this 1 year. There were many times when things were hard, times when we didn't know how we were going to pay the bills as a family, but they would get paid. Sometimes when the road ahead didn't make sense. I remember us kids asking her more than once, Mom, are you sure how are we going to keep going? And she would always look at us with unwavering belief. And somehow that belief was enough for us. Enough to keep helping, enough to keep believing in the legacy that we were growing up in. My mom is one of the hardest working women I know. Rain, snow, mud, blazing sunshine every day. She was out there tending to those ostriches. She knew every one of them, their names, their personalities, and their ridiculous little hairdos. She could tell if a single feather was out of place. People would sometimes question why they had names. Through this process, they even thought it was for publicity. But those who knew and grew up there, we knew the truth. All three of us kids were raised alongside most of the ostriches that were destroyed. We watched them grow up, and they watched us grow up. My mom learned everything she could to care for them. She was an expert in her industry. She taught herself how to hatch chicks, how to treat injuries, how to build braces for legs and toes, and how to understand what happened when one passed. She knew treatments and was an expert in these animals. She never gave up on one of them. We may not have had fancy barns or expensive fencing, but when you were at our farm, what you would see every day was dedication, fresh bedding every night, and the happiest animals that ever lived. A herd that laid down together in their circle to protect one another. And a woman who came back into the house each morning satisfied that every one of them had been tended to. These ostriches weren't just animals to her, they were her life. They were her purpose and they were her identity. And that identity was taken from her on November 6th. Her screams for them to stop will live with me and most of the world forever. The rain poured and almost 1,000 gunshots killed our family. The RCMP watched her cry for help, and they did nothing. The most inhumane killing happened that night. Sorry. For months, we pleaded with our government, asking for one simple thing. Just test them. Test the birds that had been healthy for decades, not just this year. Test the animals that represented a living laboratory of resilience and hope. Why wouldn't we want to understand that? Why wouldn't we want to test them and protect that? But they never did. And I never imagined that one day my mom and I would be arrested for simply feeding our own animals after cheering for the RCMP and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency after them saying we could. I remember sitting in that pen beside her, surrounded by decades of life and hard work. We were feeling like we were Thelma and Louise, two women refusing to walk away from what we loved. Crying in the truck, looking at each other and just saying, I love you. We weren't fighting for attention. We were fighting for one moment where someone in power might choose to do the right thing. But that moment never came. And now there is no going back. They're all gone. Today, my mom walks out her front door. She doesn't like to walk down the laneway anymore. To the empty pens where 35 years of life stood. Her overalls still hang downstairs in the hallway, idle with the story of her purpose. Just like the fields that once held the herd she loved so deeply. We were going to be the third generation ostrich farm, us kids. The CFIA destroyed this. Our heart is broken, but I promise you this, as her daughter, I will never leave her side. Her strength is still there. Her faith is still there. And as a family, we will continue to carry forward the love and dedication she poured into those animals for decades. This journey is not just about us anymore. It is about justice. It is about accountability, and it is about everyone. Everyone who felt that heartbreak of what happened. We stand for you, we stand for truth, and we stand for every one of those ostriches. And I promise you one thing, we will see this through. One day, my mom and I are gonna look at each other and we're gonna cry, but it's gonna be tears of joy, and we're gonna say, we did it. We may have lost in one way, but in another way, we know that God has a plan, and together we will see this journey through for freedom. To understand what happened to our farm, it is important that we walk through the timeline clearly. What began as a routine report of 2 deceased birds quickly escalated into one of the most extreme agricultural enforcement actions in recent Canadian history. In mid-December 2024, ostriches on one side of our farm began showing signs of illness. To us, the symptoms looked similar to what we had seen before with Pseudomonas, a bacterial infection that occurred on our farm in 2020 and had been diagnosed properly through tissue sampling and by our veterinarian. We immediately implemented stronger biosecurity measures while trying to reach our veterinarian for help. We found our main vet clinic had been sold and was not reopening until January 1st. Another veterinarian in Vancouver that would come to our farm annually was unable because of a family emergency and was leaving the country. At that point, we still did not know exactly what we were dealing with. Half of one side of our whole farm was not getting sick at all. H5N1 was not on our radar. Based on what we were seeing, we believed it resembled that same bacterial problem, not a reportable avian influenza emergency. Despite later accusations, we did, by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, we have the call logs, and they admitted and seen and made it known that we did seek veterinarian help. And this, all of the, we have a bunch of submissions made for evidence that will back up all of these claims that have been submitted to NCI. On December 28th, Canadian Food Inspection Agency reportedly received an anonymous tip alleging avian influenza on our farm. That itself should raise a concern. If anonymous complaints can trigger major enforcement actions without accountability or proof, that system can be abused by anyone with a grievance. At 1:29, Canadian Food Inspection Agency called Dave Belinsky, my mom's business partner, at the farm. Symptoms were discussed. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency representative agreed that the symptoms did not sound like avian influenza at all. We told them that some of our birds were sick, some passed away, some were actually getting better. They explained how in a commercial poultry facility situation, we would have thousands of chickens dead over a 24-hour to a 36-hour period. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency representative asked that if it would be okay if they came to do a couple samples on our farm, and they wanted them to be fairly fresh and they would want to collect them within 24 hours. At that point, we believed we were following the rules and working cooperatively. December 29th, on the morning of December 29th, 2 ostriches we had were deceased. Based on their condition, it appeared that they had died overnight or that early that morning. At 10 o'clock, Canadian Food Inspection Agency was reported the deaths. Additional calls followed, and by about noon, the agency was formally notified and that they were going to send somebody out to collect the samples. We expected CFIA would arrive quickly to collect the samples based on the instructions that they had given us the day before. December 30th. CFIA attended our farm December 30th around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. At about approximately 1:43 in the afternoon, an oral and rectal PCR swab was collected from the 2 deceased male ostriches. The samples left the farm around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. From our perspective, serious diagnostic concerns arose immediately. By the time the swabs were taken, the birds had already been dead for an estimated 16 to 36, it's about 16 hours. No blood was taken, no tissue samples, only a throat and rectal swab were collected off the 2 deceased ostriches. They did not provide us with a chain of custody for documentation, and as we would like to note, the PCR samples were driven more than 7 hours to Abbotsford, leaving our farm. According to later records, the lab logged them in at 12:57 in the morning on December 31st. That means the positive results were generated roughly 49 hours after the birds had died. PCR is a molecular detection tool. It detects fragments of genetic material. It does not by itself prove an animal died from a virus, that it was infectious, or that our entire herd was infected. That is why proper veterinarian diagnosis normally includes clinical correlation, necropsy, tissue sampling, and where needed, additional laboratory work. None of that happened at our farm. This is why we kept asking and begging for Canadian Food Inspection Agency to test our living animals. None of the animals that were destroyed on our farm had ever received one test. All those requests were denied. December 31st, 2024, at approximately 2:07, we received a phone call from someone identifying themselves from working at the Abbotsford lab. We were told that the 2 PCR tests had come back positive for H5N1. The call order was signed roughly 42 minutes later. This is important because this is December 31st, and they signed the call order already. We were not provided for a formal lab report at the time of the call. We would later on have to find and ask and seek for the documentation to see those lab results. Something that we were hearing going through the process with other farms, that there was other farms in the Fraser Valley, all of their animals had been destroyed, and we, on the phone with them through discussions, asked them, have you ever seen your results? And they said no. We find this to be extremely alarming when people's full livelihoods are being destroyed. Later documentation appeared to contain errors and inconsistencies about the number of dead ostriches and the condition of the sampled animals. It is also important to note that Winnipeg is the designated national lab to confirm for the highly pathogenic avian influenza, and the timing of the confirmed testing was still remaining unclear when they received those test results. Our call order was signed after they had only reached the Abbotsford lab. January 2nd, quarantine documents were not sent until January 2nd. Not served personally, but by email. However, those documents were dated the December 28th, 2 days before any positive lab results had even been reported. In a later proceeding, the Canadian Agricultural Review Tribunal found that personal service was required and that electronic service did not justify or satisfy the statutory requirement. That matters because these parliamentary safeguards are put in existence for a reason. Proper service is not a technicality. When the consequences include quarantine, penalties, and destruction, these are parliamentary safeguards for farmers that exist for a reason. Personal delivery service is an important purpose, enabling an agency to assess the disease risk, evaluate the farmer's capacity to comply with quarantine measures, and take immediate protective action. Email service defeats these purposes entirely. The CFIA stated themselves in an email that many of the attached information documents that we were going to see won't reflect the process, as they're geared towards commercial poultry farms. So we felt like we were working with the CFIA to come up with a plan that actually would suit our type of farm. On January 3rd, the farm was pulled into a 5.5-hour Zoom meeting with about 10 CFIA officials. During that meeting, the farm was asked whether the birds were the farm asked them, were the birds going to be depopulated? Because it felt like a whole lot of an interrogation. During that time, they asked for all the research documents to explain the research, acting as though they were extremely interested in the research. They, at about the 5.5-hour mark, my mom said to them, "Are you going to kill our animals?" And they still said, no, we're still really interested in what you're working on. But it was actually brought to our attention at that time of that 5.5-hour basic interrogation that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency already signed the kill order for our animals. So they were not truthful. By then, the call order had already been signed on December 31st. This discussion and it also focused heavily on the genetic and scientific value of the ostrich herd and whether that we would qualify for that exemption. We were encouraged to pursue that process. January 5th, January 3rd, we also get an email saying, congratulations, that we qualified for the special rare genetics, and which was very relieving. We thought that that was actually going to give us hope to save more than half of our herd. January 5th, Dr. Tsukamoto, the president of Kyoto University, that had been working with Universal Ostrich Farms on developing antibody research, sent a letter directly to CFIA and the Canadian government offering to help. He offered his IGY science and even his stockpile of H5N1 antibodies as an added precaution to help treat our ostriches. This was never responded to by the Canadian government. It just went in silence, met with silence. Canadian Food Inspection Agency, I'm just gonna move to the next page. And WOA, they kept blaming that, I'm just gonna go one more, sorry. On January 7th, vets, we'll go back, to January 7th. There's so much material here. It's been such a long time. It's hard to even sort it all out.
Katie, can I,
yeah,
you can
absolutely
relax for a second, listen to my question, maybe because I know you're still in the middle of your timeline, and I know how important the timeline is, because it shows that what was explained by CFIA on a couple of occasions, including that Zoom meeting of the 3rd, when the cull order had been issued
already,
and when it appears as though even before the lab results were determined, a decision had been made. And I know great concern in this whole tragic tale of your family farm is the lack of transparency within so that people whose entire lives are capable of being destroyed by a bureaucratic decision don't have the right to scrutinize what went on. But in the midst of your slides, as you were starting your timeline here, you had something about Stephen Pelech and his very, very expert opinion on the validity of PCR testing for this kind of condition, and how, now, here's a question. Did you know that the tests, the results of which were supposedly the basis for a kill order, which apparently was issued before they even had those results, and that they lied to you about on January 3rd. Did you know that there was that expert opinion out there that the PCR testing of these birds was invalid? Did you have that evidence when you were dealing with CFIA in early January?
Not with Dr. Pelech, no. This was just common knowledge of the PCR tests and the highly questionable use of them, that they were never meant for a diagnostic tool, which Kerry Mullis said himself. It says right on the box, not used for diagnostic purposes. We knew, so December 31st, we got results saying that we did test positive for H5N1. My mom's gonna go into that a little bit more, because those test results should have never been, the call order should have never been signed yet until those test results had reached the Winnipeg lab. That's where they could test for the H5 and the N1. And so my mom will go a little more into that, but yeah, to answer your question. But so Dr. Pelech at that time, we did not have his expert witness report on the PCR. It just was a very common understanding through the times of COVID and everything that we've seen, that they should not be used.
Okay, all right, well, thanks for clearing that up. You just go right ahead then with the timeline if you'd like.
Okay, sounds good, thank you. On January 7th, CFIA vets attended for their first inspection on our farm, asking biosecurity questions that would have probably been better asked days earlier if the interest was truly in public safety. Inspectors then proceeded to come into our home for coffee and snacks and use our farm bathroom, which again stood out to us. Wouldn't that be a potential biosecurity issue? Them coming in and eating snacks and using our farm bathroom? We again asked them how they were addressing the migratory birds spreading avian influenza. And the vet had said to me, she said, that's not our concern. That's not our jurisdiction. What are you going to do? Kill all the wildlife, the wild birds in the world? And I said to her, I said, I said, so killing all of the farm animals in Canada is going to save us? So she, then we had completed, at this point, we had been given a distinct unit exemption application to fill out by Canadian Food Inspection Agency. This process raised immediate concerns because of the form was plainly designed for commercial poultry operations like chickens, ducks, turkeys, and geese. Ostriches and ratites, which are biologically and operationally different, were not listed in this Unit 1 distinct package. This raised huge alarms to us, and we said to them that we cannot fill this package out properly as it does not pertain to our farming, to our environment of our farm, or what we farm. We were told that if we didn't complete the form, it would be treated as non-compliance, so we filled it out despite warning them that we could not fill it out accurately. To our surprise, not to our surprise, I guess we shouldn't have been surprised. January 10th, that exemption that we had was denied, and we lost the right to the special rare genetics exemption. The letter that was sent to us by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency on January 10th laid out in there that this would add a burden to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to actually have to find out and do the tests of our ostriches to seek what their special rare genetics and value would be. In this letter, they also write that this decision was subject to no appeal, which raised another huge concern to us and our rights as Canadians.
Katie, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
And the whole world may be ahead of me on this, but what was, you've distinguished between the poultry business and the raising of chickens and turkeys and things, and this form that you were required to fill out, even though it obviously didn't apply to turkey or to ostriches. But you filled it out anyway because they told you had to, and then they rejected it. Mm-hmm. So they jumped through this bureaucratic hoop to make it look as though they were complying with some theoretical purpose. Mm-hmm. But it made no sense to you when you were filling it out, and of course you were rejected on January 10th for the exemption that you sought. Special rare genetic exemption, is it called?
Yeah.
What was the purpose of raising the ostriches, and can you explain the role that this scientist in Japan was playing, whose opinions were completely ignored? Mm-hmm. Can you just go into that a little bit so we understand why these ostriches were being raised and how special, how the special rare genetic exemption might well have been applied in that context?
Sure, absolutely. So for the last 30 years, my mom's business partner, Dave Belinsky, had his own, they kind of met about 30 years ago and collaborated and made Universal Ostrich Farms. Dave Belinsky will contest at some point and be able to talk on how he brought ostriches from Zimbabwe and Namibia and had quarantines set up and extensive experience. And when my mom had brought her ostriches and they collaborated, there was many times when they would think that they had rare, that like an Arabian black, or there was something blue. Oh gosh, it's escaped my. But another one. Mm-hmm. They had this. These animals are long-living animals. We had them for 35 years, and they were from other parts of the world. So it was very much in our minds that we thought for sure that we would have even maybe a protected species of ostrich. Okay. So then with the science, so for years we've been involved in just with ostriches, my mom and us, our family, setting up different markets, always trying to utilize the bird. Again, my mom saw something that was special in these animals, their ability to heal, that they were prehistoric animals and what they could offer humanity. Their meat is extremely lean, high in protein, and it's one of the only red meats that a diabetic can eat. It's extremely healthy. Then we got into just oil and trying to promote an ostrich oil industry. The ostrich oil, my mom will speak on this as well, but has huge healing purposes for eczema, scar tissue, burn victims. And we were working, there was contracts, they were working with a hospital, and every year we were getting closer. The awareness of how amazing the ostrich became closer and closer. And we even started up a pet company, which I was involved in, Bizarre Bites. And that was, again, just to try to bring a natural solution using ostrich products to the market to allow animals to get off antihistamines, to have a natural, more effective way to manage their health. We were having amazing results with that as well. A lot of this, as we were leading up to, they were setting up satellite farms and they were trying to build up the stocks and the numbers in Canada. And they had a huge vertical integration plan with their companies. My mom will speak on this as well. But just as everything was really coming together is when COVID-19 happened. And that was the big crash. It just stopped everything, as I'm sure everybody in this room felt it. And that had to get the farm to explore, what were we gonna do? How were we gonna feed the ostriches? And so Dave Belinsky actually went and found an article on Dr. Tsukamoto in Japan and his extensive research and his love for ostriches. He's actually known as Dr. Ostrich in Kyoto, Japan, and he treats his ostriches like family. But he was not at the beginning stages of his science either. He was well into his science. He had developed masks lined with antibodies. He had lozenges and nasal sprays. He was working on lots of things. So it was very exciting to think of the thought that when all of our processing facilities, everything had come crashing down to a dead halt and everybody was on lockdowns, that we could actually become a positive in a time when everything was so negative and there was a viral threat, that maybe these ostriches could do something amazing with their antibodies and the COVID-19 crisis. So they developed a relationship with Dr. Tsukamoto, which was garnered over time. They Dr. Tsukamoto wanted to know really who they were and get a sense that they loved their animals as much as he did before he got involved. During COVID, they started to do some work with Immune Biosolutions out of Quebec and Frederic Leduc, and they were working with him. He is a commercial poultry antibody lab, so he specializes in poultry antibodies. He was really excited when they started talking about the ostrich antibodies because he'd always wanted to work with ostriches, but he thought that they were really scary. And so here's the eggs getting brought to him, and he thought it was a fantastic, it was that he could work on them, and it was just a really great opportunity. When he had started working with our ostrich, and he had an antigen that was developed, and we had done some treatments on our hens that is safe. Again, there's a lot of controversy over antigens, but we can get into that later, or someone. And so we did the treatments with our hens. The antigen is given to the hen within 4 weeks. The antigen, which is just one protein of a virus and synthesized, it goes in and creates an autoimmune response within the hen, and then it is dropped down into the ostrich's eggs, and then you can extract from the IgY the ostrich antibodies. Frederic Leduc in Immune Biosolutions started doing research on the yolks after they had been inoculated with the antigen. And within his first round of results, he was completely surprised
and shocked at how amazingly strong they were. They were proven to be 40% more effective than the chicken antibodies. And then as he started to do more research, they had found, and they have proof in their results, that it could not only just block COVID-19, but the ostrich antibodies had something more special, and it could actually neutralize COVID-19 and all of the variants. Now, the scientific proof and data got brought forward and was extremely exciting for our family, because we thought, this is it. I looked at my mom and I was like, oh, okay, you're right. They're going to do something amazing for humanity one day. And the antibodies, we were very excited and started to reach out to government on different levels, emailing, sharing the research, sharing the science. And within a week, Frederick Leduc phoned the farm and said, I'm sorry, you guys, I've been bought out. I have been made to sign an NDA, and I can no longer talk to you guys, and your research is done indefinitely. You will not hear back from me. So that was, again, it was a little bit of a blow to the family. It was very exciting. We've had a lot of highs and lows through this whole journey. But we knew at that point was a turning point for us, especially for the farm, to know what was in those eggs, have scientific proof and data that showed what they held. And then that's where led on to really working with Dr. Tsukamoto.
Okay. Oh, okay. So
because after, Frederick Leduc bowed out fully, and then.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out what you might have contained in your application for special rare genetic exemption, which you were denied on January 10th. Is much of what you've now told us as to your understanding of the scientific value in maintaining this herd, was that the nature of which you put into your application to be exempted?
So, with that distinct unit package, what was extremely misleading, they sent us a unit package, and it was based off different distinct units of our farm. It was not about the value and rare genetics. So this is where the misleading, it really confused us, and it set off another alarm, because we had been granted saying, and I had submitted the email, it is on there, my mom and I put it on a slideshow, that, congratulations, you qualify for the rare genetics. And then between January 2nd and January 10th, somehow something happened in there that we lost it. And it was not the distinct unit package, because the distinct unit package was a misleading package talking to us about distinct units and sections on our farm, about animals sectioned off separately. And it was all made and pertained to a commercial poultry facility. There was nothing in there that discussed our special rare genetics. So we don't know how we lost that ability to be able to fight for valuable rare genetics.
You were just told it was denied.
It was just denied in that letter on the January 10th that you see right there.
Without any indication of their reasoning within
I believe they state right there, actually. It says, this consideration would require a significant burden of proof.
Right.
So it was too much work for them to actually figure out if we qualified for the valuable rare genetics.
So they didn't give you the opportunity to pull it together in the way you've described it to us.
You're right.
Because the bureaucratic process didn't provide for that, and they themselves evidently concluded they didn't have the resources to look at it, so therefore you haven't met the test.
Correct.
And
then we were given the January 10th notice that you're reading, the second page. It states that we failed to read the requirements now because it would require a significant burden of proof. They also put in here, which is extremely alarming and very sad, is that a mental health link for farmers at the end of it. So here we're being told on January 10th that we're to destroy all of our own animals by February 1st by our own hands. And here's a mental health link, because you're gonna need it. And if this is the kind of service that Canadian Food Inspection Agency is giving to our farmers that holds such an important role within our country. And our farmers, who are the backbone to our country, providing us with nutritional food, and generational farms get a mental health link at the end of being told that you're going to lose everything. And there they wanted us to kill our own animals by February 1st by our own hands. And somehow during that process, it was always alarming because from the beginning, when we were supposedly had avian influenza and it was so bad, we were somehow the experts to handle the virus, kill these animals, and dispose of them on our property,
Right.
with not looking back. But come February 1st, when we weren't compliant, then we weren't experts anymore. We were nobody, and we were supposed to be, we had to be cut out, shut out, and they were going to take over, and they would kill.
And just one more bit of evidence that you gave, and then we can get back to your
Sure.
timeline.
Yeah.
You talked about a guy, Fred Leduc. Is he with that lab out in Quebec that was testing, that viewed your herd as scientifically meaningful
Yeah.
at a certain point, and then he called you and said that he's out of there. There's an NDA and he's been bought out or something to that effect. So that lab,
yeah.
which had been an ally of yours to some degree in endorsing the scientific value of the herd, withdrew from expressing that opinion, or can you
Yes.
clarify that?
Yep, I know the farm had tried to get a hold of them a couple times, no answer. And so there's been no contact there. That clinic is still in operation, Immune Biosolutions, and they've went on to work with animal antibody science.
Okay.
And then Frederick Leduc has went on to be the chief officer of EVA Corp, which is a brand new, huge government-funded facility that works on all animal integrative antibody research.
So January 14th, we started adding chlorine dioxide to our water systems, which people were reaching out to us consistently by email, giving us options. A lot of them seemed a little far-fetched, but this one definitely seemed like it was worth a try. So it was 5% of a solution to the volume of water, and we started adding this to the ostrich waters and spraying it in some of the mouths of the ones that had been symptomatic or looked like they were a little bit symptomatic but recovering. January 10th was also the last date we did not observe any other deaths in our herd that were related to illness.
How many deaths had you had taken place between the first ones in late December
Yep.
to this point?
69.
Sorry,
69.
69 of a herd of how many?
Just under 400.
Okay.
So then we had a couple ostriches during the time had been shot. There was one that died because a helicopter came over and hit itself on a fence post. We had other deaths after that were not related at all to viral infection.
Of the 69 that died between late December, when the first two were reported, and this mid-January, of the 69, how many would have exhibited comparable symptoms to the first two?
Well, they all had very similar symptoms, but again, at that time, those symptoms really looked like the same similar symptoms to the Pseudomonas bacterial infection that we had on our farm in 2020.
Okay.
So at that time, we had about 10 ostriches pass away, and it went away. And it was after we did the due diligence, or proper due diligence as a farmer. The veterinarian did the proper sampling, which was a tissue sample, which came back positive for the Pseudomonas bacteria. And then at that time, the herd of ostriches had gained its herd immunity, and everybody just went on to normal life up to 2024.
Okay.
And raises a question now, which I would get it into here, though, is through working with Dr. Pellick, finding out that Pseudomonas bacteria is actually a byproduct. A part of avian influenza is Pseudomonas bacteria. And the question could even remain today, did our ostriches die from Pseudomonas bacteria with avian influenza? because our ostriches have always been and are extremely robust and strong and bounce back from even some of the hardest. Even a wound heals really fast on an ostrich.
Right.
And it was a really interesting moment for us to think, where I brought up, it's very important too, is in December of 2020, those ostriches, later on we found with Dr. Pellick, because he had egg yolk that we were working on with him from prior, that he did a scan on the egg yolk, and he said the ostriches that have been on our farm prior, 2020 and prior, had avian influenza H5N1 antibodies in their memory cells. So this would make sense. This is why all of our ostriches on our farm from different age categories were from 2020 prior were not getting sick, and the ones that were on our farm 2020 after the migratory ducks had been in our farm and landed at the hundreds. It was a very rare year, and that's when those ones got sick because they didn't have the antibodies yet, and they had to go through the development process of the burning out phase. Some will die, but the ones that survive are the ones that have the immunity. It's herd immunity. And those are the ones that you keep and you want to keep alive because they are resilient. They will pass that down, those antibodies down to their young in the eggs. And just like a cow or a pig, it's the same thing. The best approach is the burning out approach when Canadian Food Inspection Agency is involved. And the burning out approach is only used when Canadian Food Inspection Agency is understaffed, which does not make sense at all. So when they're overstaffed, they make the biggest mistakes. But understaffed is the burning out approach. And that's just where you allow it to burn through the herd or the flock. You quarantine, you still dispose of your animals properly, heightened protocols, biosecurity, and it will eventually run its way through the herd, through the flock. And the ones that are alive, you want to breed. You want them to have the babies because their antibodies get given down to the young.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so we are
January 14th.
January 18th. So throughout the process, we continually ask the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to confirm by testing the live birds. A local veterinarian, Dr. Amber Robinson, in the cusp, even contacted us at the farm, offering to test using portable centrifuge machines and come and do on-site testing. January 18th, we thought that this was a great opportunity. We were excited about this, but we had not expressed this to Canadian Food Inspection Agency yet. On January 18th, we received an email warning us about penalties if we tested randomly. That effectively blocked that ability for independent testing. This warning also stated that we were not allowed to treat or treat our animals either. So in the policy under penalties, it says you cannot treat or test your animals that are under quarantine. Canadian Food Inspection Agency was very aware that we were already treating our animals during the interrogation of that Zoom call and in other emails. They were very interested in what treatments were we using and what was effective. So it just highlights another problem, that this is an agency that picks and chooses through their policy when it's convenient for them. Because of if we were to test, we were going in the penalties, you're threatened with up to 6 months in jail and a $200,000 fine. Our herd was condemned. They were basically sentenced to death and guilty by association, based on the 2 PCR swabs that are taken from the 2 deceased ostriches many hours after their death, without the blood samples, without tissue samples, and without testing the living birds. As of the February 1st call deadline approached, while it was close approaching, legal action was necessary. We found a lawyer, and it takes us to January 31st. An injunction was granted by Justice Batista, granting us a judicial review. which later the Canadian Food Inspection Agency would go after Justice Batista, saying that he erred in law and overstepped his jurisdiction as a judge. We thought that the situation, after we got granted the judicial review, would stabilize, but the situation did not stabilize. February 6th, CFIA issues new instructions, including hazmat requirements and forced separation of our roosters and hens, something we told them that would create chaos and offer no biosecurity benefit. They also suggest netting our whole farm to keep wildlife out. We said, would this not cause a problem with birds flying into the netting and getting tangled and cause even many more problems? This requirement was given over a month after the PCR tests, the 5.5 hour long biosecurity team's call, and the vet inspection. That's when we were getting given even more suggestions or what they wanted us to implement on the farm for quarantine measures. But we had still, at this point, never been personally served with quarantine documents in a lawful way. If they had served us and did proper service at that time, they would have been able to assess the risk. They would have been able to look at the farm, see that we would have never been able to net our whole farm, that these items that they were requesting from us to do were outlandish. They were impossible. So a lot of this could have been all fixed by, in the beginning, proper service. Then alarmingly, one of the last Canadian Food Inspection agencies on site was February 26th. After that, they did not return to our farm until September 22nd, when they came to take over our farm. If we posed such an extreme viral threat, why was there no ongoing monitoring, no soil testing, no water testing, no live bird testing, and no active surveillance on our farm? During this time, this is where, from the beginning, from January on, my mission, I knew that we needed to use our voice and we needed to become very loud. I contacted every media, every podcast. I took every opportunity. It didn't matter if they had 14 followers or 1,400. I knew that we needed to get our story out there to save our animals and for the hope for change. Our science was not at its infancy. It was at the usable stages. It was real. Our surviving birds were offering a living laboratory of resilience. As the public attention grew, international support grew too. John Catsimatidis became one of our strongest advocates. I met John through just somebody who told me about his booker, Carol Meany, and how he had this big voice, but he loved animals, and how he would be the perfect person to align with to try to save our animals. He opened the doors for us, which were huge doors, to Secretary Kennedy, Dr. Oz, the FDA, and the NIH. Now, the only reason, Fifth Estate did an interview with us as a family, and they asked me a really aggressive question. And it was, do you feel that you made Canada look bad by reaching out to the USA for help? And I said, not at all. I'm like, when your own country will not listen to you, when your own leaders will not listen to you, and when you're resorted to only contacting Canadian Food Inspection Agency by email, no phone calls, no sit downs with the people that were Courtney Fotheringham, the people managing the operation, when your own agriculture minister stays silent, and when Marjorie Michael is quiet, and they knew as this grew and escalated what was happening, they also knew that the days kept climbing of health of our animals. There was 100 days, then there was 170 days, then there was 200 days Our animals were healthy. We just deserved the opportunity to be tested. So no, I didn't feel guilty or it felt like I made Canada look bad for reaching out to the USA. At the highest level of where we needed to be, and that was for our agricultural minister and Heath MacDonald to really try to see and look at us as an independent study. Again, this is pointing out a really big problem within the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, is that this isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, and that's what was coming to our door. They could come, the more we learned about policy, it was about how they can come on based off speculation, how they can come in and destroy everything without testing. Anonymous calls can lead to the demise of your whole livelihood. And
So you had your MP in Ottawa going to bat for you, and you had some elected provincial MLAs in Victoria.
Yeah.
So you had all, but in either place, I take it from what you tell us, did it sort of crack into cabinet enough for ministerial action on your behalf?
It kept hitting a brick wall. Yeah.
What response, if any, did you get back from the Minister of Agriculture or his staff or anyone else?
Nothing.
Nothing.
We never had any direct communication with him, a farm visit, anything to actually come and see, to see what we were fighting for. At this, and this is where the shifting of the goalposts became impossible to ignore. First of all, CFIA said it was about H5N1, and then it was about trading partner policies. Then the United States, including the NIH and FDA channels, offered collaboration. This was met with silence. Then the CFIA shifted to, we had a novel reassortment never seen in Canada before narrative. Then our expert, Dr. Pellick, challenged that narrative. The CFIA shifted back to, this is about trading partner policies. Then we got a second letter from the United States, Trump administration, offering full collaboration and even testing our animals for free. Nothing but silence. Then Dr. Oz offered to even move our ostriches to his 900-acre ranch in the United States, having, at that time, they had the U.S. ambassador meeting with Mark Carney's team in Ottawa, trying to make this happen. Nothing ever came out of it. Then finally, we were told that we had the most virulent threat of avian influenza in Canada. And I want to remind everybody, this is all just still tracing back to those 2 PCR swabs of 2 deceased ostriches in 2024. This pattern, the goalpost kept moving, but the outcome never changed. We had multiple wellness checks with multiple PLTs, police liaison teams, checking on our well-being, seeing how we were doing. At the same time, we had 2 ostriches that had been shot. We had RCMP files made. We were told that there was going to be an investigation done on these animals. Nothing ever came of this. So it was very frustrating when we would have 7 PLT officers at our gate saying, we're just doing a wellness check on you. And I said to them outright on a video once, I said, so 7 of you can come to see how we're feeling today. But we can't have a proper investigation done on the animals that we've had shot on our farm. So around this time, March, we get notified after we've given Canadian Food Inspection Agency all of our science and research, and they know that we were hoping to work on diagnostic test kits for farmers to help mitigate the viral threat of avian influenza. We get an email that the same agency that is claiming that we never provided them with any of this material and that this is basically hokey pokey and ostriches might not have antibodies somehow, that so this same agency, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, actually gave a grant to Lafont Medical out of Quebec for almost $700,000 in March of 2025 to develop our research. So they are developing the diagnostic test kits using animal antibodies, even using one of my slogans, unity for immunity. People saw healthy ostriches in the sun and dancing and eating and living for months. We spoke publicly about herd resilience and natural immunity. We explained that survivors matter. You should not destroy every survivor and reset every farm to zero immunity. World Organization of Animal Health itself recognizes that disease control also depends on surveillance, compensation, and trust. That matters because fear destroys reporting. When farmers believe that reporting illness means losing everything, they become afraid to speak. Something very dangerous is happening in Canada right now, and most people don't even realize it. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is supposed to be one of the most important protective agencies in this country. Their job is to work with farmers, detect threats early, protect our food system, and help prevent the spread of disease. But when farmers start to fear the agency that is supposed to protect them, the entire system breaks down. Right now, farmers across Canada are watching what happened to our farm. They saw animals destroyed without testing. They saw enforcement instead of collaboration. They saw government agency arrive with authority to kill first and ask questions later. And the message that sends to farmers across this country is chilling. And if you report illness, you could lose everything. If you speak up, you will be punished. And if you question the science, you will be silenced. That is not how you protect a country from disease. That is how you drive the truth underground. Farmers are the first line of defense. They are the experts. And they're the first line of defense when it comes to the viral threats. There are people who see animals, they see their animals every day. They're the ones who notice when something changes. But if farmers are afraid to speak, afraid to report, afraid to cooperate, because they feared the total destruction of their livelihoods, then Canada has become a less safe place. Trust is the foundation of biosecurity. Without trust, the entire system collapses. Right now, that trust is broken in Canada. We are seeing it as not just a problem on one farm, it's a systemic failure that is putting our entire country at risk. We need an agency that works with the farmers, not against them, an agency that values science, transparency, and investigation, an agency that Canadians can actually trust, because when trust disappears, so does the very system meant to protect us. And if we don't fix it now, the consequences will reach far beyond any farm. The day that changed the rest of our lives. When they did occupy our farm and there was the seizure, there was drones flying above, we decided to stay in our pens, not out of defiance, but out of responsibility for our animals, not knowing what was going to arrive. We knew that the police were coming. We knew CFIA was on their way, but we did not know to what extreme. We stood in the pens with our animals because we wanted to be able to stay feeding them and give them some comfort while the world was going to change and be turned upside down. There was 10, there was 20, there was 30, and then we just stopped counting after 30, 40 police vehicles start coming down this road, down 135 kilometers away from the middle of nowhere. It was so shocking and devastating that this much force would be coming for our small little farm. We found out that there was command centers, a telecommunication center, that there was canine units, a task force. They had helicopters. It was nothing short of a military operation that came to our small little farm on September 22nd. My mom and I there was an email put out from Courtney Fotheringham requesting that we continue to feed the animals and care for them while they set up for destruction. When they arrived and they went to tell us we had to leave the pens, we said, no, we needed to feed that day. We said, we're gonna feed and then we'll come out and we'll work with them. They said, no, we are taking over, we are in control. And that is why we remained in the pens, was we were hoping for a logical situation to come out of them reading the email and allowing us to continue to care for the animals while their life was going to be turned upside down. There was a warrants, I'm trying to just kind of go through really fast, the warrants that were given to us and put up. Mark Yabakowski from Canadian Food Inspection Agency, I was standing at the fence, my mom and Dave were standing back, and he was luring me to the fence saying, no, just take these papers. And I said, no, I know when I take those, you guys are taking over. And he said, no, and we have it on film. No, if you just take these, and I'm gonna explain it to you. And so I took the papers, which again raises question, and I don't know in the law, but he served me and I don't own the property. He didn't serve my mom and he didn't serve Dave the warrants. So anyways, we look at the warrants, we accept the warrants, and he says immediately, you need to leave the premise. We are taking over. And then we just defied that a little bit longer, showing him the email that we were requested to feed. This ended we went back and forth. We just sat there. We were hoping that they were talking to Courtney Fotheringham, Mark Yabokowski. And then my mom and I, finally, he just says, yes, you can go feed. All the supporters cheered and we were crying and we cheered. We said, thank you. Thank you for just letting us take care of our animals in one of the worst times of their life. And as we went to the back of the farm to continue feeding, we were at about halfway through chores. We were surrounded by police vehicles. We were baited to the back. They waited until we got to the very farthest part of the pens. Nobody could see. And they arrested us in the middle of chores. And we just knew, I just looked and I said, they lied. They lied to us. And my mom was crying and we looked at our birds and we knew that this was possibly one of the last times that we would feel them. We would get to see them or touch them. They kept reading us our rights, saying, do you understand you've broken the Section 35 of the Animal Health Act? And we said, no, we don't understand. My mom repeatedly said, no, I don't understand. What have I broken? What have I done? I'm feeding my animals. And so we were arrested. They take us up to a command center and they leave. They're all in hazmat suits. And they drive out of the quarantine area with us not in hazmat suits, so we should have been disinfected. They drive up the highway, we get to the command center, and one of them is still wearing their hazmat suit from inside the pens up at the command center. And my mom and I are like, virus? Like, look at this. What is this? It's a theatrical display. Something going on here. This is no virus. Look at this. And so then he strips out of his hazmat suit really quick and hands his pole that he's been holding the whole time to another officer not in anything. So I'm like, well, there it goes. You just watch all of, what should have, if this was really a violent threat, the precautions that should have been done. And then they proceeded to allow us to use our personal cell phones to make our phone call to our lawyer. So everything in this whole process was just another example of the theatrical display of punishment that they were putting on us with no accountability or proof of a virus. The occupation was for about 52 days. They took over our property. We've had hundreds of police officers, 24-hour shifts. It became normal to get followed around your own premise with a drone. You couldn't cry. You couldn't. Every time we had an important phone call, the drones were right over our house. While we were at the command center, I remember looking at a van up there, and he had the big module, and you could hear everybody talking in our field. There were surveillance. They were listening to everything was being said with our supporters and in the fields. It was nothing short of literally a movie. It was, you walk out your front door and you go down your laneway. It shouldn't become something you get used to. You walk out there and it becomes like they're all there and, it's like a normal thing to see that these police officers are there. Well, you're just fighting for justice to be done in the Supreme Court of Canada to come down with the proper decision that they would have heard our case. When they came down with that decision, it became very clear in that moment to us as a family, and this is our speculation, is that it was way too coincidental in a time frame that the Supreme Court of Canada they had a decision the same morning when those marked gunsmen were set up in that kill pen. We had the unmarked gunsmen were on our property. They were standing staged on top of the $200,000 straw kill pen. Everything was ready to go. And then that we got the decision from Supreme Court of Canada, which would make us think that Supreme Court of Canada was involved, giving them enough time to collect the samples or do whatever they needed to do on our farm, destroy our animals, or prepare to destroy our animals. And they came down with the decision when they said, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency said that they were prepared.
Our animals were destroyed in the most inhumane way. November 6th, the shootings, the RCMP didn't notify us that the shootings were going to start. We were caught outside with the gunfire happening, with the animals screaming at the fence for it to stop. The RCMP stood there with their backs to us. There was no precautionary. They did not do any secure perimeters. There was supporters locked out on the road 251 meters away from this active shooting of almost 1,000 gunshots that were let off that night in a kill pen at night. The rain poured. There was a time in there when they had to take a break because they did a massive RCMP shift change while our animals were laying there half wounded and dying, watching each other in the most inhumane way. This should never happen to anybody ever again. They destroyed our family. They made our animals watch each other die. They made them run in panic and fear from the very people that we taught them to trust, and that was humans. All because of bureaucracy and red tape. Because we have a country that doesn't want to listen to our farmers or listen when we know something is wrong. Our family's left with nothing. They took everything. My paraplegic father laid in the house the night and waited for someone to come in and tell him that all the birds were gone. He didn't want to cry because he said he thought that they had a camera in our house and he didn't want to let Canadian Food Inspection Agency know that they won, that he cried. They took everything, but they didn't take our strength and our hope and our faith. And I do believe that these ostriches were martyrs. They were beacons of hope, and they're going to continue to change the world. They're going to wake up our farmers across Canada. We're going to rise up. We're going to come together in unity, and we are going to change the way we are protected by our government.